All right, so we have been looking at, in recent weeks, some essential ingredients for relationships, for healthy, thriving relationships. There are some essential ingredients that we've been looking at, specifically as it relates to marriage and the family. We looked at love a few weeks ago, Bob Combs. Last week, we talked about how relationships are all about knowing, and that there are levels of knowing, and that unless there's face time, conversation face-to-face, then the intimacy and knowing one another really can't happen. So we looked at FaceTime. Today I want to look at specifically, again, we're trying to hone these down to some specific things. I want to look this morning at the need for wisdom. Wisdom. Before Holly and I were married, we went through premarital counseling. You know, that was a new thing in that day. There wasn't a whole lot of premarital counseling outside of who's going to stand where and when who's going to say I do. You all set? Yeah, let's go do this thing. We went through a number of sessions of premarital counseling. I read a lot of books on marriage. I'd heard a few sermons on marriage. But we weren't into it very long, and I realized I lacked a lot of skills as a husband. I mean, I read a lot, but when I went in, I go, whoa, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing here. Things weren't exactly working out all the time like I thought they would or should, or like she came out of the bedroom one day and said, "Do I look fat in this outfit?" Guys, I realized I was not prepared. I realized that it was real important how I was going to answer that question. And I realized right then I lacked a lot of wisdom here. Now, it's not that I didn't want to have a happy marriage. It's not that I didn't want my wife to feel good in her own skin and be confident. It's not that I didn't want these things. It's just that I wasn't sure how to. Have you ever had the want to, but realized you lacked the how to? Our first child was born. Beautiful baby girl, Sarah. At the hospital, while Holly was in labor, the doctor and I, who is a friend and comes here to Grace, the doctor and I played cards while we timed her contractions. What? Now, there wasn't anything wrong with that. It wasn't sin, right? But, looking back, maybe that wasn't the wisest thing for me to do, right? I mean, we had it covered. Honey, you all right? All right, you good? You good? Yeah, you through that one? All right, okay, deal them up, Dan. Here we go. Then when I remember at the hospital, too, when, the child's born, Sarah, and I wanted to hold my baby girl for the first time. I wanted to hold her. So Holly hands her to me, and I took her, and her head almost fell off. It was like, whoa, what's up with that? And the nurses and everybody goes, what are you doing? You got to hold their head up at this age. Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, hey, I almost lost her head the first day of life. Just rolled right off. I didn't know that. I wanted to be a good father. I mean, I'd thought about this. I'd prayed about this. I'd read up on this. It's not that I didn't have the want to. I just lacked the how to. You ever had that happen? Maybe you're a parent. It's not that you don't lack the want to. It's just that you lack the how to. So this morning, what I want to look at is this. Here's the thing. When you lack the how to, what do you do? What do you do when you lack the how to? That's what I want to focus in on this morning. What you do is you build a home with wisdom. What you realize that you lack is wisdom. The how to. Proverbs chapter 24, verses 3 and 4. Watch this on the screen. It says, by wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding, it is established. By knowledge, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. See, what a marriage and a home needs so desperately, one of the essential qualities is wisdom. Everybody jumps into a marriage and a family with the want to, but we lack the how to. Kevin Huggins has written a book called Parenting Adolescents, and Kevin was a youth pastor here many years ago. Maybe some of you remember him. He went on and wrote some highly respected books. Anyway, he wrote one on adolescence. Interesting thing he says at the beginning of his book. He says, while loving my kids is often as natural as breathing, sometimes loving them as God intended is the most serious challenge I've ever faced. What is he saying? He's saying, I have the want to. In many ways, that's as natural as breathing. But it's the how to that is the greatest challenge I've ever faced. When you hear statements like this, I'm losing him, and I don't know what to do. When you hear parents say, I'm pulling my hair out, I've tried everything I know, I'm at the end of my rope. When you hear a guy say, I just don't understand her. When you hear somebody say, this next generation, this younger generation these days, I just don't get them. When you hear a teenager say, my parents are just idiots. Every single one of those statements is a cry for wisdom. It's not that any of those people don't want these relationships to work. It's not that they don't desire a marriage where there is understanding, a marriage where there is intimacy and closeness and friendship. It's not that the teenagers, the students, or the parents, want this huge, tense, adversarial relationship where they're going into. Nobody wants that. It's just they don't know how. Just don't know how. So where does wisdom come from? Where does wisdom come from? That's a really good question. Where do you get wisdom? Where do you get the how to? Job, in his life and in marriage, went through some crisis, right? Job, everything fell apart. Everything was working for Job. Job had all the answers. Job was writing the books. And then one day it all fell apart, and his wife's in his ear, and his kids were, gone. His empire that he built, everything was gone. Job had a few questions. Job, here's what he said. But where shall wisdom be found? See, Job lacked the how to. And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living. Ask your friends. His friends weren't providing a whole lot of help. The deep says, it's not in me. And the sea says, it's not with me. So much for picking up a seashell and getting the answer, right? Where's wisdom? It cannot be bought for gold, and silver cannot be weighed as its price. From where, then, does wisdom come? And where is the place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living and concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and Death say, we have heard a rumor of it with our ears. We heard it's out there. Here it is. God understands the way, and He knows its place. So let's look to Him. First of all, we have to understand that coming from God is His wisdom, and we'll call it the law of God. First of all, there's the law of God. It's even hard to write that word, isn't it? Law. We bristle. We bristle. All of us, to a certain extent, we bristle when we hear the word law. But if we don't understand, we know that if we don't understand what the laws are and what the consequences of violating these laws are, life can be much harder than it needs to be. Right? Life's hard enough. But if you don't know the laws and the consequence, life is harder than it needs to be. You ever say to somebody, why do you make it so hard on yourself? It's good to know about the law of gravity and its consequences, because if you don't, life is much harder than it needs to be. Right? And so just as there are physical laws that govern the universe, there are also spiritual laws that govern our lives as well. And so we need to understand these things. And wisdom would say, wow, I need to understand these things, or else life will be much harder than it needs to be. Deuteronomy chapter 30, God pleads with his chosen people who he's led out of Egypt and were on the verge of going into the promised land. And listen to what he says to them, Deuteronomy chapter 30, beginning in verse 15. See, God says, I have set before you today life and good, and death and evil. If you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, I hate rules, his rules, then you shall live. Then you'll live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you're entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away and you will not hear, no, I'm not listening to this, and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you will perish. You'll not live long in the land that you're going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live. Choose life. You know how much better marriages and families would function if they followed God's laws. They're like laws of gravity. Choose life. You know, thou shalt not commit adultery. Man, how much better marriages would go, huh? I mean, it is basic, fundamental 101. My goodness, how much pain. Thou shalt not covet. How much of our marital stress and family stress is driven because we want what they got, and this, and this, and this, and it's pulling us apart. How much better family would go, you know, children, honor your father and mother. Basic fundamental laws. Do not get drunk with wine. Man, how much better off marriages and families would be if we just took the wisdom of basic black and white, here are God's laws. Choose life. You have life or you have death. Now, the law of God comes to us, and understand as it comes to us, this is wisdom from an authoritative voice. An authoritative voice. When God says, okay, here are my rules, well, so who are you? The creator and the sustainer of the universe has spoken. You would think he would know, wouldn't you? I mean, who knows? You know, Job's asking the question, well, where does wisdom come from? How do I get wisdom in my situation, Job says. He's listening to his friends, and he's going, so much for that. He goes out and listens to the sea and the birds, and I'm not getting anything there. Where is he going to get it from? Where's wisdom come from? How do relationships work, really? Come on. These things are too important to us. How do they work? Well, just logically, you'd think, well, surely the designer and creator and engineer of all these things would know. The law of God. We need to see it as wisdom from the authoritative voice. He knows. Dennis Rodman. You know who Dennis Rodman is? It's great. This is Dennis Rodman with the president of North Korea. And he went over and had a little chat with the president, and he came back and claimed to be an authoritative voice in foreign affairs, right? And we all went, really? But he thought he was. He thought he had it figured out. Now, if Dennis Rodman's going to do a lecture on playing defense in the NBA, man, you better take notes, right? Here's another authoritative voice. This is Dr. Spock. Some of you older folks, and you can, self-define there if you're in that category. Dr. Spock will be a familiar man. He was an authoritative voice in his day. In 1946, he wrote a book on baby and child care that was one of the biggest bestsellers of all times. It was translated like 39 or so different languages around the world. He was the authoritative voice on raising kids. Today, people look back at his advice and wonder, how destructive was this guy to an entire generation? So the question that you have to answer for yourself is, who is going to be your authoritative voice when it comes to marriage and the family? Where does wisdom come from? I have the want to, but I lack the how to. So where are you going to go for wisdom? You better choose wisely, because the stakes are extremely high. Now, I've got good news. There is wisdom for the ages. Proverbs chapter 1. And you can turn to the book of Proverbs. Watch these verses. Watch carefully these verses. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. In other words, an awe and respect for, oh my goodness, he has spoken on the situation. I have such an awe and a reverence for the Lord that when he speaks, he knows what he's talking about. Talking about an authoritative voice. That's the attitude. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Where do I start with this wisdom question? Well, it starts with who you're going to listen to. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction. Proverbs 3:7. Do not be wise in your own eyes. That's the person that goes, I'm not listening to anybody else. I can figure this out. Who needs directions? Right? Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, turn away from evil. Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Where do we start? You better get to the Lord. Last week, the Chamber of Commerce had its annual awards event. It's a huge deal up at the Combo Center. I don't know how many people were there. I'm guessing at least 500, 600. I'm trying not to exaggerate. It's a huge deal, and they give out, there's a group from outside Ashland County that comes in. Another Chamber of Commerce group came in and then went through this evaluation. And there's different categories: small business, service businesses, whatever. Okay, and then they give out these awards for the best in the county. And there's an education award that's given out. And Ashland Christian School, Veritas Christian Academy, Classical Christian Academy, was in the running. We were in the running. We were nominated by somebody in town, I don't know. So we're in the running. So we're all there. It's really cool. We didn't think we win. We're all kind of sitting around and go, well, this is great that you got nominated, whatever. Well, guess what? We won. It was awesome. It was a great honor. So so Rich Police and Bess Ann Carr went up to accept the award. And Bess Ann said, man, I want to thank the people at Grace, you guys, for the ministry that was provided there. And Rich got up, and he wasn't planning on winning, so he didn't have his script he pulled out. And he kind of got up there and he says, I could talk about the academics of the school, the statistics, and what comes out of Ashland Christian School, how our kids test academically. He said, but the bottom line is this. An education has to start with and find its place in the Lord Jesus Christ. See, that's where it starts. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge and understanding. It's always intriguing to me to listen to actors and personalities from Hollywood speak with authority on matters of relationship. Think about that. It amazes me that people listen to them. Have you looked at their lives? I'm not saying watch the movies. It all works out there. That's the script. They're just following the script. But have you ever watched their lives? And yet they speak with authority on relationships. Dr. So-and-so from a prestigious university speaks with authority, and they're educating the next generation. Really? Proverbs 14:12, there is a way that seems right. Well, it makes sense to me. There's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death. 14:27, the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. So here's the deal. God sets before you and me today life and death. And he encourages us, choose life. Second, the law of God is wisdom from an authoritative voice. Second, there are the principles of God. The principles of God. Now, when we get into the principles of God, this is a category not necessarily on the level of thou shalt not, but it's more along the lines of that's not too smart. Okay? All right? For example, two 18-year-olds come to you, to me, and they want to get married. They're 18. Both of them love Jesus, accepted Christ, and they want to get married. Now, is that okay with the law of God? I mean, you got two believers getting married. It's legally okay, the laws of the state, whatever. So is it wrong for those two 18-year-olds to get married? Answer is no. No, it's not wrong. But you sit down with them and they say, well, we just met 2 months ago and we're in love. And neither one of them has a job nor a prospect of a job. And they both come from just disastrous home lives. They've never really seen modeled anything reminiscent of whatever. And they come to you and they say, well, Pastor Dan, would you marry us? Now, is there anything wrong? Would I be sinning and violating to marry them? No. But would I marry them? No. Why? Because it's just not wise, right? It's just not wise. The two 18-year-olds have the want to, but there's a good chance they lack a bit of the how to. So there's a lot of ways in which we all are like that. I was like that. Okay, I had premarital counseling. I was 23. I read the books. I still went into it lacking a lot of wisdom. Proverbs. Turn there. Find the book of Proverbs. I don't have a page number. I'm sorry. But find the book of Proverbs if you haven't gotten there already. It's filled with wisdom. Proverbs is a whole book filled with wisdom. And watch this. It starts out this way. Proverbs chapter 1. I'll read the first 5 verses and listen. Listen and pretend you're the 18-year-old that wants to get married. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. I want to start a business. That's great. Is there anything right or wrong? No. But you better sit down with someone who's done it before. Right? There's a lot of wisdom that you can gain. So, the principles of God you could look at as wisdom for what we call skillful living. Wisdom for skillful living. It's just smart. Now, when the word that's most frequently used in Proverbs as wisdom, when you read through Proverbs, the word wisdom comes up all the time. And the word most frequently used for wisdom is also used to describe the skill of a sailor to be able to kind of navigate things and figure it out, you know. He's just an old salt that knows. He's got wisdom about the sea. It's used to describe the craftsman. You know, they just got that wisdom, right? Or administrator. Wisdom, in a sense, is like life skills. Skills for godly living. Life skills. A friend of mine here at the church has a meat packing business that he runs, that he owns and runs. It's fascinating. I went to watch. You know, I grew up in the suburbs, right? The closest I ever got to a cow was riding down I-75 and go, look, that's a cow. Can I spell cow? C-O-W. Good job. That's all you need to know. Well, was I ever wrong? I didn't realize there's a difference between like a cow and like a steer and whatever. And I'm still learning, right? But so I went to see this operation. It's absolutely amazing because in the back door comes a steer. And within a couple hours, I can walk out the front door with a good-looking steak and a package ready for my grill. How in the world does Bob do that? Bob usually sits right over here second hour. How does Bob do that? Well, here's how he does it. He's got some skill. I mean, if he said to me, Dan, have at it. There's the steer. Duh, I'm clueless. I do not have the skill. Come here, horsey. You know what? No, it's not a horse. You know, I don't have the skill. How does he do it? Wisdom. So when we look at our lives, wisdom is essential for skillful living. Wisdom is essential for things like the use of your time. Is there anything wrong with this? Well, no. It's just not the wisest use of your time. Managing money. Or is there anything wrong with spending money on this? Well, no. But it might not be the wisest use of your money. How to love a person. You know, somebody says, I really love my wife and kids. I just don't know how to show it. It's true. Every single one of us is going to face these things with our spouse and our kids. We have the want to. Something's put in us from God. We love them. We just don't know how. We're just not quite connecting. Proverbs 12:4. Proverbs talks all about these things. An excellent wife, apparently you can land with some other kind, but an excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones. A little later on in Proverbs 19. A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is a continual dripping of rain. Guys, here's a little bit of wisdom. Don't go home and quote that verse to your wife today, all right? Just let the Spirit. House and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. You know, it's interesting when you look at those verses, because here's what can happen. You get a foolish son who gets the inheritance from his father. He marries a quarrelsome wife. That's disaster. That's disaster waiting to happen, isn't it? That's wisdom from God. A foolish son gets all this money, and then he marries some hot-looking thing that he, whatever, and she is just the most, discontented, upset, all the time, and it's never enough, and whatever. So you got a quarreling wife and a foolish son, and they get married. That's disaster. Happens all the time. Here's a couple of pictures. Now, is there anything wrong with what that guy's doing? Is there anything wrong with that? I mean, if you come up and say, hey, there's a law being violated here. You say no. What would you say? Well, that's just stupid, right? He's lacking a little what? Wisdom. Here's another picture. Is there anything wrong? These guys are just getting out of the sun. They just want a little shade under there. They're having a little picnic there, invite their wives and kids. And you go, well, wait a minute, man. Maybe, so what's going on here? Well, maybe a lack of a little wisdom. Proverbs 13:24. Parents, this is for all parents. Whoever spares the rod, spares discipline, decides that they're not going to get involved with the whole thing, hates his son. But he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. You hear it a lot. Oh, I never spank my child. I love them. Proverbs says, no, not really. The loving thing to do is to get in there and get involved to discipline them. If you don't tell little Johnny no now and then you're going to raise a barbarian, right? So this is wisdom. This is wisdom from God. And a lot of parents go, I don't understand. I love my child, and he's a raving maniac. Well, I know you wanted to love him, but you didn't have the wisdom to love him right. And you didn't discipline him. You didn't get involved. I should say never. I have met very few parents who don't have the want to about raising their children well. Really, I mean, every parent wants to. But we all lack a degree of how to, don't we? So what do? Well, when you lack the how to, you build your house with wisdom. Proverbs 3:5 and 6. And these are classic verses that many believers hang on to. You'll hear older saints quoting these verses often, and their lives are guided by them. Well, there's a reason. Look at this. Trust in the Lord. Fear the Lord. He has the wisdom. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. And don't lean on your own understanding. Well, it doesn't seem right. I know. Don't lean on that. Trust God. In all of your ways, in everything you're doing, acknowledge Him. Okay, God, I'm counting you in. I'm acknowledging you. I fear you. I honor you. You're the source of wisdom. In everything I do, I'm looking to you. Give me wisdom. And He will make your path straight. This is wisdom for life. Choose life. It'll keep you from chasing your tail. It'll get you the right direction. It gets you guidance. We desperately need wisdom. All right, thirdly, the law of God is wisdom from an authoritative voice. The principles of God are wisdom for skillful living. And third, let's look at the Spirit of God, just briefly. The Spirit of God. The Spirit of God. Watch these verses in James chapter 1. They're on the screen. Listen. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. And listen, if you get married and have kids, you will have trials of various kinds. You'll have trials, you go, I never thought I'd see this coming. You're going to have them. Well, what in the world am I supposed to do in this situation? You will have those. Count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Don't run, don't get out of the oven. Don't run from the kitchen. The heat's good for you, all right? So stick it out. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. This is what I would call wisdom for your situation, your particular situation. See, here's the thing. There are laws of God, black and white. Follow my commands, my rules. This is life. It comes from an authoritative verse. No question about it. Do you know the wisdom of God is follow my laws, all right? Then there's this category of like principles that you follow, principles of respecting authorities, principles, a lot of these principles that you follow. You go, wow, you need to know this. This is wisdom for life, for skillful living, managing money and time and all these kinds of things, right? But then there's a time when it's like, well, God, what do I do in my situation right here in this thing that's confronting me? I need to have the wisdom to navigate this with my child. If you have more than one child, you realize something early on. Your kids are all different, and you wonder, how does that happen? These, my two kids, if you have more than that, my two kids, they came from the same parents, they lived in the same house, and they ate the same food. How in the world are they so different? Well, wisdom shows you that. Wow, they're different. So then you quickly realize you can't quite take a cookie-cutter approach to all your kids. Sarah responded differently than John did. Sarah, it had to be in her face, what don't you understand about this? John, all I had to do was look at him. John, I'm sorry, Dad. So guess what? You need God's wisdom to how do I approach this child and this child. It's going to be different as you love them and practice the wisdom of discipline, right? You have the want to, you just don't understand the how to. Marriages are different. You need the Spirit of God. Mom, your daughter walks out and says, can I wear this? Wait a second, I'm looking for a Bible verse here. Now, there are some guiding principles about modesty and are you living to the glory of God, whatever. Yeah, I get that. But how about this outfit to go here? Guess what? What do you lack? What are you looking for? You want God's Holy Spirit that resides in each believer to give you the wisdom. And so you say, ask your Father. Right? Marriages are different. Marriages are different. And playing those things out in your particular situation, what does it say in Peter? Live with your wives in an understanding way. So, guys, pray like crazy that God gives you special insight and wisdom into leading and loving your wife. Wisdom for your situation. Wives, your husband. Some wives, and Peter acknowledged this in 1 Peter 3, some wives live in situations where their husbands don't love God and lead spiritually. And so a wife has to go, what do I do in my situation? You need wisdom from God for your situation. And the scripture says, there are ways that you can relate to your husband that could win him without a word. Well, how in the world am I going to do that? I keep telling my husband what to do, and he isn't listening. Well, guess what? There's wisdom from God on how you can win him without a word. Well, that's going to have to come from God. You're right. You're right. for your situation, see? Wisdom for different seasons, different times of crisis. What if your marriage or your family and everything hits a crazy period or failure? You wake up and you're in a total mess. And you go, what do I do? What do I do with this mess? Well, you need the Spirit of God. You say, okay, I get the laws of God, the wisdom of God. I've blown through all those things. Now, where do I go from here? Proverbs chapter 1, verses 20 to 23. I love this. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the markets, she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates, she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? You know, I love that. It's a very kind way of saying, how long are you going to be stupid? You know, how long are you going to like doing this? How many times are you going to hit your head up against the wall and realize that just redoubling your efforts isn't going to work? You know, that's my paraphrase, right? Wisdom is going, how long? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? I love this. If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my Spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. What a wonderful promise of wisdom from God. See, most of the time we want to, we just lack the how to. And when you lack the how to, well, you build a home with wisdom. So, my closing question would be this. How desperate are you this morning? How desperate are you? You say desperate for what, Dan? Desperate for a woman? I'm pretty desperate. Desperate for a man? I'm pretty desperate. No, that's not what I'm saying. How desperate am I that these kids straighten up and behave? No, that's not what I'm talking about. How desperate am I to get out of this mess? No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. Listen. How desperate are you for wisdom? Not that God would give you pixie dust and fix your world. No. How desperate are you for you to say, God, I gotta hear from you. I have to hear from you. Through your word and your wisdom and your Spirit to know how I am going to navigate this situation in my life and where I'm at. How desperate are you for that? You know, when it comes to marriage and family, have you ever read a book? Have you ever read a book on it? How desperate are you to know these? Have you ever read a book? Have you ever searched the Scriptures on a particular topic? Take a topic, any of these topics related to marriage and family, and just say, God, I'm going to search the Scriptures on this particular topic. What does it look like to love? What does it look like to lead? What does it look like to raise your children in the instruction of the Lord? What does it look like to respond to adversity? Have you ever done that? Have you ever taken here's something you can do. Are you desperate for wisdom? Are you desperate for wisdom? Then here's what you do. You find an older couple in the church that you look at and you admire and you respect. And you call them up and you say, we would like to take you out to dinner. And we're buying. And when you come to dinner, we want you to answer this question. Bring to us 3 things that each of you have learned since you've been married. There you go. How desperate are you? Take them out to eat. Cost you less than one counseling session. Take them out to eat. And what are 3 things that you've learned since you've been married? You're frustrated with parenting, ready to pull your hair out? Here's a suggestion. How desperate are you? Here's what I'll throw out as a recommendation. There's a lot of couples in our church here with lots of kids, right? I won't embarrass them, but I could point a few out right here in the service. They have lots of kids. Here's what you do. Take them out to dinner and pay for the babysitter, all right? Say, hey, we want to take you 2 out to dinner. We're going to pay for a babysitter, and I want you guys to share with us 3 things you've learned about parenting those 4, 5, 11 kids. It will be priceless. This morning, there are 70 people at a marriage retreat from here. You might look around and say, where are they at this morning? Well, they could be sleeping in, but they could be at the marriage retreat. 70 people carved out of their weekend say, we've got to go get some wisdom about marriage. See, here's the thing about desperate. How desperate are you? Wisdom is not downloaded like an app on your phone. That's not how it works. Oh, I think I need some wisdom. Okay, poop. That's not how it is. Wisdom is not something, I'm just praying about it. You know, around church circles, you get some sappy Christian answers sometimes. It drives me nuts. I need wisdom. I'm praying about it. What? What does that mean? You think God's just going to download it like an app? I close with these words in Proverbs chapter 2. Listen and see if you hear a note of desperation. My son, if you receive my words and you treasure up my commands within you, if you're making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding, yes, if you call out for insight, if you raise your voice for understanding, I need some answers. You raise your voice for understanding. If you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you'll understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come understanding and knowledge. He stores up wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. How desperate are you? Are you hungry enough to seek wisdom like that? Are you humble enough to admit that you lack it and you really screwed some things up and you need to listen to some other people? We all have the want to. We all have the want to. But we all lack the how to. And that's why we're all desperate for wisdom. Let's pray. Father, may our hearts be desperate for your wisdom. And we plead for you to give it to us because it's death without it. In Jesus' name, amen.